Welcome to The Pivot, where we explore the shifts that open new possibilities for how we see, act, and navigate the world. Right now, so much is changing faster than we can make sense of. It's easy to feel unmoored, caught between an unraveling past and a future that's still, taking shape. But there are those who can already see what's emerging, beyond the noise, beyond the confusion. In each episode, I sit down with visionaries, thinkers, practitioners, and pioneers who are not just imagining the future, but actually living it. They're sensing what's next and mapping the way forward. So if you're wondering how to navigate this shifting landscape, how to stay grounded, adapt, and even thrive, you're in the right place. This is not about quick fixes or the 7 steps to be more effective. This is about asking the right questions of yourself, of each other, of life, learning how to make sense of this changing terrain and how to move in it. You don't have to figure it out alone. I've got you covered. This is The Pivot. Welcome. Welcome to our first episode. I'm thrilled to welcome Amah Sia, a remarkable teacher and guide who makes the subtle world practical and tangible. She brings together executive experience with profound wisdom about human potential and consciousness. She'll talk about a new film that she's just produced, and we will explore some of her cutting-edge thinking. And we'll play some jazz, we'll kind of improv, and hopefully dance at the edges with each other and see what emerges. I hope that you will find this interesting, provocative, helpful. Amah, let me introduce you. Amah Sia is an intuitive channel, filmmaker, and teacher specializing in multidimensional consciousness. Following a transformative awakening experience during her career as a C-suite designer in New York City, Amah embarked on a spiritual journey that led to the development of her multidimensional methodology. Based in Boulder, Colorado, she works with evolutionary explorers from corporate executives and scientists to healers and educators, helping them access higher states of consciousness and download new intelligence. Amah's approach bridges ancient wisdom with modern challenges, making esoteric concepts practical and accessible. She's the creator of Unprecedented Leap, a film about humanity's evolutionary paradigm shift, and leads trainings that teach subtle realm techniques for personal transformation and planetary awakening. Amah, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
It's a real honor to have you as the first guest on this podcast. And I know you as teacher, guide, friend. We've been through a lot together.
Yeah, we have. And it's been a privilege and a good ride.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited to have you. And, in thinking about where we could go, there were so many possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
But this film is really quite something. And I thought maybe that's a good place to start. And we can, branch out from there. So I think the aim in our exploration together is why now, and, what's this about and where we can go.
Well, it's interesting because it's sort of counterintuitive, but the why now about something that's so hopeful is because there's so much fear. So the why, and my film links how these two things are part of the same awakening process, which is basically the hopeful message is that we are receiving such infusions of higher consciousness that it's raising our awareness at a planetary level and an individual level simultaneously. And that sort of ironically creates a lot of crisis. So if you look at it sort of as fractals of a whole, so what's true in one part is also true in another, that if you take it as a look for us individually, when we do things like meditation or yoga or any kind of contemplative practices, we actually increase the frequency of our light body. We become, that's kind of the quote unquote enlightenment process in a way. You can see it as embodying or holding more light, which sort of goes back to the metaphor of like the light bulb when you got that boom of inspiration, like you kind of in classic comics see the light bulb come off.
Right.
There's more light. And what that does is it raises or enlightens or creates a higher frequency within our light body. And so part of my work, to kind of backtrack a bit, is the intersection between our physicality and our metaphysicality, which could be this physical body and the subtle body, and the nervous systems that intersect between them. And in our culture, we seem to think that that is two separate things.
Yes.
But in reality, it's one. And so we all have the experience of goosebumps. We all have the experience of these like energetic prickles that happen. But what happens is, the reason I mention this is what happens is the more that we do these contemplative practices, the higher frequency or the more energy we're holding in our subtle light body. And we feel that physically. But what that also means is that whatever we have sort of logically suppressed or pushed down because of our own developmental process, all of a sudden begins to enter back into our consciousness. So that's sort of the shadow side, or the oh my gosh side of doing spiritual work.
Yes. That
all of a sudden, like the crap that I thought I dealt with begins to kind of like enter back into one's consciousness. Yep. And we begin to feel it. And we begin to feel it subtly, we begin to feel it physically. But that's the healing process. It's like as we awaken to higher potentiality, the crap comes up. Okay. But in a fractal nature, that is also true on a collective level.
When you say collective, you mean all of us at the same time. Yeah.
So like the whole, like if you think about like it's happening to me, and yet it's also happening to my neighbor. Like this is this intensity of the times, and I can go into like human development and leaps of consciousness. Okay. So in our history, we've had leaps of consciousness as a species, and we can go into those different leaps, and you can go back into integral theory by Ken Wilber and a lot of other stuff. Yes. But we've had these leaps, and we're in the middle of a leap. And these leaps, which you coin as a pivot, because there's something that's different here. And we're being required to shift our thinking. And so we can go into a sort of metaphysical understanding of that, which means there's more light, those inspirations that I spoke of, and it raises the frequency of my individual consciousness, but it also raises the frequency of the collective consciousness. So whatever I might have suppressed, so does my neighbor. It's coming up for him or her. And that neighbor may or not be so well equipped to deal with it.
They may not be aware.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They're already dealing with their kids and their mortgage and, whatever. Sure. So, not that I'm not, but we have different levels of ability to cope with this tremendous infusion of light that we're receiving as a planetary consciousness.
So this is a fascinating, for me, a new way to look at some things. So for many years, I've been aware of this increasing unease. I call it the disquiet, and in my work with clients, there's been a tendency to make it individualized. But what you're bringing a light to, literally, is there's this unease is this shift that we're talking about that everyone is feeling and experiencing. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And we're all experiencing it through our own lens.
So it would have unique flavors, unique experiences,
and
feel very personal.
It is, because that's how healing happens. It happens with you. It happens with me. Like the collective's only that's the Aristotle quote, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, where I'm just a portion of the whole process. And so it only happens individually. And then we enter into collective fields. So it's both. It's a both and situation where I experience it as an individual phenomenon. but I'm embedded in a collective experience where it's also happening.
So what are the implications when you as an individual receive it, start developing? You spoke of healing, integrating, operating at a higher level of awareness or consciousness. Is that unique? Is the impact of that unique to you, or does that start impacting the collective as well?
It's both and. So that's happening to me, and my ability to handle that affects the collective. So I can be a transmission of somebody that can handle that intensity and then be there for others, which is what I do professionally. Yet also somebody else that I may be in the grocery store with or have a bump fender bender with into my car may be receiving the same intensity and having a very different experience of this incoherence. And that person then affects me. And somebody out there is really traumatized beyond a fender bender.
Yep.
And having very reactive moments, and that affects me. So it's both.
Yeah, I can see that. I get the
people are more jacked up.
Yep.
And more transitional at the same time.
Yeah, and this goes a long way to provide a backdrop to the things like the polarization that we're seeing.
Exactly. It's
almost like regressive
for me
behavior.
Well, it's progressive and regressive. It causes some people to go, whoa, I better deal with this on a whole nother level.
Right.
Which is progressive.
Sure.
And there's also understandable regression, because I know when things happen faster in my personal life than I can handle it, like all of a sudden I'm bombarded with so much change. I go, whoa, let's slow it down here. My nervous system is overwhelmed. I can't cope.
Yes.
Which is actually a regression. I want to go back to earlier states of comfort because I'm overwhelmed. I want to find an old equilibrium where I feel like I know what's going on.
Yep.
Which is technically regressive.
So, I work with leaders, people are up to things. And, if they're interested, if they're here listening to us, there's been a progressive movement at some level of what I'm calling the pivot, right? When I put myself in that place of not sure what to do, but I know I need to do something different. What's your counsel? How do we
very first and foremost, attune to yourself. Where am I at? So that you can feel my own system in relationship to the incoherence. And then to acknowledge that the incoherence is not a problem, it's information. It's interesting. So attuning to oneself causes an inner coherence. It's not necessarily that you're happy, but that you're aware that you're unhappy. Okay. Or you're aware that you're angry, or you're aware that your left calf is freezing, or that your mind is racing. So you can look at these different levels of your experience: physical, mental, emotional, or even spiritual. So you track yourself. And the more you get accustomed to that, which is part of the process of mindfulness meditation, the more that becomes familiar to you, you can become coherent in yourself. Not necessarily happy or whatever, but coherent. You know who you are. Then when you encounter incoherence, you can view that as information. Somebody else is suffering. A community is suffering. Whatever is happening out there separate from me. So you're able to hold the polarity, go back to polarity, you're able to hold your own awareness and the awareness of what's happening outside of yourself.
So there's a real capacity building happening.
Right. It's really stretching. And then from there, you can make decisions. You can, and then we can go into how you would choose to do different things.
Yeah.
But you have then all of a sudden an awareness of self and other, whether that other is an individual or a community or culture or planet. But you've got a sovereign self that's aware of the other. And then that other feels held and understood and seen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that in and of itself is a healing act, even before you do anything.
And what you're touching on right there, we all have had that experience. Like I know I can summon that up without even maybe understanding some of the more esoteric things that you're speaking to.
And that it's actually, it's beautiful what you just said. It's not esoteric.
Yeah.
It's like we all know what it feels like to be seen, to
That's
be,
right.
more woo-woo phrased might be presenced, but we all know what it feels like just to, when someone is there,
Yeah.
just there. And when you go back to the turmoil of our time, when someone's just there, like really there, to see what's happening in Gaza or Venezuela or wherever there is, that's the individual experience and the collective, like to be, that's the healing. So being able to be there for an individual or a situation on the planet is a healing act in and of itself. And the more exponential it gets, so being able to hold that for my partner is like one big deal. Okay, that's something in and of itself, particularly in moments of heated crisis,
Right.
or just lack of communication or whatever.
Yeah.
But then to be able to hold it in increasing circles of intimacy, so it might be with the family or the community or the town or the nation or the country or this planet, increases my field of awareness, but it also requires me to be more and more awake to who I am personally.
Yes.
So the more I can hold of my own self and who I am, and the more coherent I can be, even if I'm not necessarily happy, the more I can hold of a given situation.
What you've been describing these past few moments, what excites me is this isn't a foreign language anymore. More and more people are exploring this, getting this. It's in mainstream media. You mentioned mindfulness or some form of meditation. That's, it's not 20 years ago, that was just not in the common discourse. So, your movie talking about this leap, and this becoming more in the center of gravity of things. What else is happening?
Okay, so I had to take a moment to pause there about your question. And as I sat with it, what came in was what my film is really about. And this gets very out there. But what's happening from my understanding is these leaps of consciousness that my film starts with, is this unexpected leap that happens. Basically, you see it in the caves of Lascaux in France, where all of a sudden humanity is creating art. And in the bones, you'll see femur bones in these caves, and they have perforations, and you realize that it's like an octave of sound. It's not just like a little whistle. It's like an octave. And there's this leap that happens that science doesn't really understand, of what made us who we are. And so I talk about the chromosomal leap that goes from chimps to humans in the film. It's but science doesn't understand. And from my experience, we are in a very similar moment where we have these exponential leaps. Like all of a sudden we've got a global brain. Okay. We've got artificial intelligence. We've got all of these major leaps of our physical extensions of consciousness. So we have mechanical, it's like writing, okay? Like all of a sudden writing changed how we communicated, changed our capacities. And this is a similar thing where it's another tool. These are like tools like writing, whether it's internet or AI. It's tools of our expanding intellectual or mental capacities, which are physical in their nature. And there's a way that we as a species now experience ourselves differently. Like I can know if I want to what's happening in Malaysia at a very visceral neighborhood to neighborhood vision if I want to. Okay, it's radical, and we're so embedded in it that we don't really get how radical our experience of our globalness has changed. And so one of the things that my film talks about is something called a holon that moves from structures of organization, like an atom connects with other atoms and creates a molecule. Totally different thing. Molecules create cells. It's these leaps of organization that are, science can't say what happened there. Like, well, all of a sudden, why did that happen? But we're in a similar leap where there's an organizational level of human consciousness as expressed in the internet, global brain, as expressed in AI, that is triggering a leap that we're in the middle of to a higher whole, to a higher organizational level that we as in our individual experience aren't experiencing because we're just part of a greater whole. And so my film is about what is that next whole that we are simply part of. And that's the Aristotle quote again, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
Like there's something that's being activated beyond us. And so my film is about unprecedented leap, and basically that there's a planetary whole that's becoming self-aware. That is what my film's about. And that is a kind of really out there concept, but so that is what I'm experiencing. It's very radical.
The radical aspect is a planetary consciousness, not just human consciousness, but a planetary consciousness. And
that the metaphor being like there's a consciousness and it's levels, of course, of consciousness, but there's levels in awareness. Like if you take the organs of the bodies, you could say the heart has a particular kind of awareness. And we have that now in our Heart Math Institute has we're becoming aware of the intelligence of the heart.
Yes.
Which is part of the greater whole, which is a human being.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
I also find it very powerful the way you're speaking in terms of a leap. It's such a contrast to even a transitionary period. And it's definitely a contrast to what is in the media and what's in the conversation a lot around breakdown and crumbling, and this is the crumbling of old systems and old ways. And that seems to be attracting a lot of attention and a lot of fear and anxiety.
And understandably so.
Exactly. And this leap gives a context for that. It gives a way to hold. I find myself at an individual level, a personal level, being able to go from like a zooming in on a catastrophe or a breakdown or something that's not working anymore that I am suffering with. And it gives me a holding, like a zooming out to a wide angle of a greater process that we're in the midst of.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring it to a personal experience, because that's our own personal experience of healing.
Yes.
Like we can have a moment of like, what the blank crisis. And then we have a moment of grace where we go, oh, now I see what's going on.
Yeah.
And we can have a new integration.
Yeah.
And so the breakdown is actually the breakdown of the habituated routines. You can see that in government or wherever you want to look at it, that no longer serve, but also had a really great function. Like I like it that traffic lights tell people what to do in an intersection. Like I like function.
Yes,
like,
they're useful.
There's good, very, very good parts that I want to
keep
conserve.
Those for a while. Yeah, right.
I want to conserve those. So you can say, okay, those are the conservatives. Okay. Like there's goodness there. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So like, let's not get rid of that. But yet I also am aware of, in my own personal healing process, the crisis, like what brings me to a healing crisis that allows me to go, okay, I got to look at things differently because I'm in some serious crisis here. And it's that expansion that the crisis required, the breakdown required a new perspective.
You bring in the word healing a lot. I'm curious of the role of healing or the requirement, or just the relationship of healing in this. I don't think it's as obvious as I initially thought.
Well, I go back to the traffic light metaphor. Like I like my habituated consciousness that knows that people are going to stay on the left side of the road while I'm on the right. And that everybody in this intersection is going to behave in the rules. Okay. So there's a way that habituated, like I don't have to wake up every morning and relearn how to make a cup of coffee. Okay.
That's
so
right.
There's a way that knowledge is a structure or a routine is a structure. But the things that become dysfunctional are also part of it. And so healing is the kind of realization of what is habitual in my experience that is unhealthy or no longer serves my own heart or my own ability to love you or my own ability to care about what's happening in Malaysia. Like, what is it that is structurally in my habituated system that actually doesn't serve anybody? So it's a level of discernment where it's not all bad whatsoever, but like, let me tweeze out what no longer is working.
I'm glad I asked this question because you're bringing a new, well, it's not even nuanced. You're bringing a sensibility to the word healing that I don't think is in our mainstream agreement about healing.
What do you mean?
Yeah, the first thing is there's a quality of generosity in how you're framing it. There's not a judgment at play that I will feel myself or I'll receive it. When we talk about healing, there's an implication of something that is broken, wounded, insufficient,
Right.
needs curing.
Right.
I'm
As if that's
incomplete
healing.
in some way. Right. Exactly.
As if that perspective is going to be healing. Right.
Exactly. And it was interesting because when you started using the word, I felt a little bristly, and it was like, oh, that's what this is. Isn't that interesting?
I love that you were able to tune into that. That's so great that you were able to. Yeah, because it's like, it's got this nasty edge. And like that, you're bad, that's wrong, we need to fix that. And, and that's the part of the problem that we bring to these cultural issues is like, that's bad, that's wrong, and we've got to fix it, which is sort of what's happening in liberal leftist, in the reaction to like, those people are too woke. There's this pejorative, like, we got the answer. And it kind of comes from that healing, quote unquote, perspective. Yeah.
This is the shadowy arrogance that comes in around change agendas, even self-improvement, spiritual.
Like there's something wrong.
Healing, trauma.
And that's what I do in my practice when I'm working with people individually is I only look at the intelligence of their defenses.
Yes.
Like those are there for very, very good reasons.
Yeah.
And I teach the client, or I work with the client to say, no, this is a good part of you. It may have repercussions now, but this is wisdom.
That was a major, major piece of how impactful you were when I worked with you initially, is helping me honor the intelligence of those movements, as opposed to sourcing them, explaining why they happened, talking about them over and over again, and
please spare me.
Still separating them as if they were, inadequate, wrong, etc. So the honoring of those. Yeah, that's right. And
like, that's
no wonder we're fragmented. Yeah.
That's so great that you say it that way. Yeah. And that's the lens that I like to look at things through, because that's on an individual level exactly what's happening in the collective, that fragmentation, where we see sort of regressive behaviors in some part of our culture we don't like as the problem, rather than seeing the intelligence of why that community is needing that.
Yes, I can see how that's a key movement. It's an unprecedented leap. It's not just a leap. It's unprecedented. So, to my mind, that's big and never happening before. It's like we're in new territory.
That's its nature. That is like, we don't know why atoms all of a sudden began to like coalesce into molecules. Like there's a leap of order, and we don't understand why. But part of my work is that there's an underlying structure of intelligence that holds information of consciousness. So there's not only like this infusions of light that I was talking about. So you could think of that as a download of light, but there's also an upwelling of organizational structure. So in my film, I talk about, it's really simple. It's like morphogenetic fields of intelligence, where like Kirlian photography will show the aura or light of around a leaf. That happens before the leaf grows into that, the physical leaf grows into that shape. And so it's the same structure that tells, like in the first division of a cell after conception, all the cells are the same. They call them stem cells. But there's some sort of intelligence that tells this particular cell it's going to become a muscle. That particular cell is going to become a bone in a particular place. So there's an underlying structure in the subtle realm that is organizing the development of life.
And we're plugging into it.
We are a part of it. We are much more, we are it. Like it is informing us. Like it's not a choice. It's not a, like there is this that's happening on a planetary scale. There's an underlying structure to it of intelligence.
So there's a part of me that's going, oh, well, if this is already happening, all I can do is just sit back and enjoy the ride. But I think what we're talking about is there's an active engagement, like we were talking about earlier around healing and the expansive holding of strategies that actually are to be honored. That's a movement. And I suspect there's other movements that, I mean, I know I'm bringing forward in my work with clients, you bring forward in your work with clients. So how do I hold both like this? We're evolving, we're taking this huge leap. There's already a structure coming through. And it seems like there's an invitation or a calling or an impulse for us to be doing something differently.
And it's both.
You say that a lot.
Yeah, that's what I love. I know when we're really hitting edges is when we're in the realm of paradox and then the realm of both and. Because that's the edge. And what it is that we're able to be in this moment where we are both experiencing an underlying field of intelligence and contributing to its edge. We are the edge. Evolution happens with these conversations. Evolution happens with this unfolding of what if we did it differently? What if we included my messed up next door neighbor in this process? What if I saw it from a very different perspective of a much more holistic, awakening planetary consciousness that's beyond me as part of the underlying unfoldment.
So in the spirit of the paradox and moving back and forth between those poles, I remember a part of the movie where you spoke of like 5% of the population are already moving into this higher or evolved state of consciousness, this greater sensitivity, this greater awareness.
Yeah.
I remember my studies with Ken Wilber, we always talked about the center of gravity or the tipping point.
Right.
Is that a sufficient proportion? Is that a gap? Is there, we need more people on board? Do you see where my mind goes? It's kind of interesting
because, because, Ken Wilber, we can go have a whole conversation.
We'll do a series of episodes.
Yeah, we'll do that. But, some of those numbers have been debunked and challenged.
Sure. Okay.
So, but the beautiful thing is that doesn't matter. There's a quote from Ilya Prigozhin. He's a Nobel winning chemist. And what he's been able to see in his work is that, and this is his quote basically, and I'm paraphrasing badly, small islands of coherence have the ability to change the whole. Now, of course, I'm not quoting that perfectly, but basically, whether it's 5% or 1% or 0.5%, the effect of small islands of coherence to affect the whole is phenomenal. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, and this is from this chemist, this brilliant chemist, is that when all of a sudden certain atoms became a little bit more coherent, they leaped into a higher whole, which was a molecule. And then that intelligence rippled through. And so we're sort of in that moment where my own coherence was what we talked about, like me knowing where I'm at, whether it doesn't even matter if I'm happy or not, but knowing myself is a certain coherence. And then I include you, and I'm able to say, where are you at? Or where's my partner at? Or my child at? From that awareness, which then creates a larger field of coherence. Mm. And we all know, like you mentioned earlier, we all know what that feels like. Yes. And it feels really good.
Yes.
And so that is an extension of the coherence. Like, I know who I am. I feel who you are.
Great phrase. Yeah.
And so when we can do that for our teams, we can do that for our communities, we can do that for our staff. Those are larger fields of coherence, and they ripple out. And all of a sudden, the person that works for me feels that way going home with her kids. So it ripples out. So these small islands can affect the whole in ways that when we're so embedded in the turbulence of our times, we don't see. But we can look back and see energetically, those are the moments of the unprecedented leap of consciousness that my film was about.
What excites me about this is I can relax into not being overwhelmed of responsibility or what I need to do. Like in my world, in my ecosystem, if I can first attend to my coherence and then to the coherence and really sense into that and become sensitive to that and be curious about it.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And
it's
that's
actually
a pretty radical pivot. You know,
it
when
is,
we think
and
about
I call it radical selfishness, which in our narcissistic culture can be really taken wrongly, and also is really expressed wrongly. I think we have so much narcissism in our culture because it's actually the necessary step that is taken defensively rather than proactively.
Yes, it does have a bad rap, doesn't it?
It does, because and rightfully so. I mean, you know, we got narcissists all over the place running major companies and governments and whatever, and we can just go down that road too. But it's a necessary to be radically selfish. The metaphor that I like to use with clients is, well, we have it in the, put on your oxygen mask first so that you're well oxygenated enough to like take care of your neighbor. Or otherwise you're going to die and everybody will die. You know, it's sort of the metaphor. But also the metaphor I like to use is to consider ourselves a cup of self, and that our role, our job is to fill that cup up with everything that nurtures us. And then the overflow is for everybody else. So that there's this sense of, I know who I am. I know what I need. I'm responsible for that. That's my job. And then I keep doing that. And then I can care for you. And that can get really twisted into, if the person doesn't, in a narcissistic family or in a family of deprivation, like, Gabbert for mine, that's the whole, overly individualistic culture that we have in the West, sort of this manifest destiny. I'm going to grab it all for myself. But it's a very thwarted misinterpretation of this developmental thrust that's necessary for caring for another person. And in the dysfunction, it gets twisted. And
absolutely. I mean, this is the majority of my practice, seeing clients and in my own life, is how hardwired we are to think about, we need to take care of the other first.
Well, that becomes out of our developmental moment of children where, in dysfunctional families where we better take care of that really frightening parent or I'm not going to get dinner, know? So.
Right. Exactly. So to even like the muscle building around, not just put oxygen on you first, because that's just to survive, but actually to enhance, to be the fullness of yourself as a first move before any others, is a pretty radical one for a lot of people.
It is, given the narcissistic distortions in our culture.
And the cultural agreements around that. Yeah.
Right. But for actual healthy functioning, like that I'm breathing well, is a good idea.
Right. So given this and the islands, which is a reassurance, what do you see as the potential obstacles? What are the threats to the leap, if there are any?
Yeah, sure there are. Because inherent in it are the understanding that if I awaken to what needs to be changed, like say, take it into a family system. Like I think if I want to be close to my brother, we got some issues here. So I'm going to come up against that which is resistant to change. And that that person or that situation or that country or that community has entrenched defenses that are going to say, oh, no. We're defending this for good reason. So my awakening to what needs to be changed is by definition going to confront that which does not want to be changed for good reason.
Yeah.
So, and that's what often happens to people. All of a sudden they wake up and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to change all this. And then they meet all kinds of resistance.
What the hell? Yeah, right. Right.
And so, of course, okay, that's exact. But they're like, oh, I get it now. Yeah. Right. And they're like, but I get it now. We should change this and that. And that says, oh, no. It's worked like this for a long time for good reason, or we're not going to change. Yeah. So, that's what they kind of tell you about.
I mean, you're killing myth number 2, right? So the myth is the leap, or our evolution is smooth, and then we hit a place of bliss. Like it's pleasant, and no, this is going to be a bumpy ride, right?
Yeah, because you come up against that which is frightened.
Yeah.
That which has worked for who knows how long.
That's right.
And for good reason.
That's right.
And that's where the compassion comes in. And so and that's where I was going to back our conversation earlier, when I can really hold who I am, I can also hold how frightened that other, whether it's person or community or, country, whatever it is, I can hold that too.
That's really quite significant.
That's it.
Before it was like a nice skill to have. Now it's a prerequisite, because if you don't have that, if I don't have that holding of you in that compassionate space, I'm just throwing gasoline on the fire of your resistance to change and in our relational space. Right.
Because then it becomes, you become wrong.
Yeah.
And then the resistance only intensifies. And, we have this kind of like distorted view of the word compassion, like it's supposed to mean this kind of like kumbaya moment. Yeah. And it's not that. It's actually that it's sort of like healing. So we got compassion and healing, all these words that like kind of get like mucked up.
Yes.
It's not even compassion. It's that I'm aware of you. I can really hold whatever's happening here. I might not like it, but I can honor the intelligence of the whole situation, which is not a mucky kind of compassion. It's just that I get it. I'm here. I'm aware. I'm present. I see you.
I also hear there's no agenda in that scene. You're not trying to change me.
Well, here it's iffy, because I may see that you're like messed up. I may like want to change you.
Right.
Like I have a kid that's a drug addict. Okay. Like, not that I do, but like, given that as a situation, I definitely want to change that.
Right.
But I can hold the pain. I can hold the fear. I can hold the confusion and not run away.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm trying to point to is if I'm your addicted son and I sense that it's like idiot compassion. It's like you're saying all the right words, and I can feel the agenda.
That's the incoherence. That's your intelligence working.
Yeah.
That's the incoherence is the intelligence. And you're like, I'm not trusting this mother.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
what's that mom to do skillfully with that part in her that does want that change, that desperately wants what's good for her son?
Well, you don't give them money.
You don't collude. Okay, got it. Yeah.
You hold the pain
What's
of
that mean?
your,
Maybe I
it
don't know
means
that.
I'm able to hold that I may not be able to fix this. There are
Yeah.
really painful things happening here. And I
Okay.
love this kid.
Yeah.
And I cannot give him more money. And it kills me because I wish if I could, I would. If I thought that was going to solve anything, I would in a heartbeat. I'd rob a bank to do that. But
So
I know that's not the solution. Yeah.
it's a beautiful example of how much is being held in the complexity, right? So it's the absolute desire. There's a humility that I hear in what you've said of just not knowing. So surrendering to the unknown, but that has nothing to do or doesn't impact on that incredible love and wanting what's best. So it's holding this complexity.
And I think if you bring that even to a corporation.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where I was going.
Yeah, where you can see, the inherent limitations or conflicting agendas in a corporation, where you've got shareholders that only want their bottom line. That's why they invested. It's like, what is the bottom line? And then you've got the people that are involved in making the corporation run, and they could be really at conflicting purposes. And you're able to hold that what the blank moment where I have to be accountable to both of these things.
Right.
And they both want different agendas. And I need, as the leader of this corporation, I have to hold this. And it may be that I explain that to both sides. I don't know. But there needs to be a larger whole that includes both if this is going to go forward. And I don't know how those conversations happen, but I know that is what's true in these major corporations all over the place. And there needs to be a new conversation.
Well, and you're bringing in a primary move that is mostly overlooked, and that is the inner coherence.
Yeah.
So as I'm listening to all those, tug of wars and pulls, whether it's in a corporation or in my family system, if I'm not congruent first, there's virtually no chance that I could connect to and help your congruence or support your congruence.
Absolutely. Because you take it to, just an individual, situation. If you're not really here, and then we enter into a real conversation, like that kid would know that the mother is BSing with her agenda. So the more that person is actually there with all of the conflicting stuff in themselves, the other person or the kid or whatever, the employees can know that person actually is dealing with a lot of crap and can see me also.
I mean, I know this in my work, and even in myself, I still underestimate the power of that, of really being seen and felt. Yeah.
I think that's when you talk about healing and that awful word, that is it.
Yeah.
That's really all it takes, because there's all sorts of agendas. There's all sorts of stuff going on. But if I'm included by that other person in all that stuff authentically, I can join in the conflicts.
That's it.
I can join in what the shareholders actually are asking for. Even though it doesn't align with my agenda, I can understand why this leader is dealing with the whole, and I'm included. I can join up. I can say, okay, I understand the complexity here. Yeah,
this joining up has a powerful movement to it. As you were speaking, I could almost see the leader standing here and the different constituents that are in conflict are all in different places. Yeah. And the leader historically would just stay in one position, but joining up is going over and meeting each one of them and connecting. Yeah.
And that's the small islands of coherence. So that leader becomes the small island of coherence that's able to interact with the whole
Yes.
And then the whole could feel safe enough. The different constituents of the whole can feel safe enough to join that coherence.
Yes.
They feel safe.
And we have taste of this. We talk about it like gravitas or presence or charisma,
Right.
but there's something so much more that we're talking about here, but there is a taste. Yeah.
And it's not a sticky word like compassion, because we don't need more kumbaya. It's not going to work. It's actually, being able to be coherent and present with all the complexity. Yeah. And then offering an invitation of inclusion, because you're able to hold it. Means other people feel safe to join you. If you can't hold it, they're not going to feel safe.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I want to give a chance for not just an intellectual receiving of what we've talked about, but I think a lot is moving. What do you think?
I know we really like tap danced into a lot of different domains.
Yeah, I lost track of time, so that's always a good sign. And a couple of things came up as we were talking, that little bookmarks. Part of what we're talking about invites an exploration around a new kind of, almost like, set of values like integrity, ethics. I think our audience would definitely be interested in that. I think tapping into, I've had direct experience of how you're able to operationalize what does seem like something extremely esoteric, like following guidance through intuition. And you've worked with leaders, and you've worked with people in all walks of life, and how to develop this, or how to remember it even. So, I guess, would you like to come back and have some exploration episodes where we dive down into some topics?
Yeah, I love talking with you. Yeah, of course.
Good, thank you. I think it's going to be a multi-series if we get into AI, because you and I have had some very rich, new kinds of explorations. Yeah, I think it's very topical. Great. So I've just given a preview of coming attractions then. For those who are really sparked by what you are working on, both the film and beyond, first of all, they can check out the film.
Yeah, it's easy. You can just go to my website, amahsia.com. And then on the top menu, you'll see a bar that says the film.
Great.
And so you can just easily access it there.
Yeah. And there's a lot of information, I know myself. So not just the film, but the other services you provide, more about you.
I don't know what to call myself, but it's psycho-spiritual coaching is the best way I can describe it.
Pretty accurate, I think.
I call myself a psychological intuitive. So
I like that. That's really good. That captures it well. Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for this time and for the absolute pleasure. And I feel honored that this is the first episode. So thank you for opening this up with me.
It was fun for me too. I love riffing with you, like playing jazz.
Yeah. Well, we'll play some more jazz. I want to thank Amah again. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you did as well. This has kicked off a lot of ideas for future episodes, as I mentioned, and then some. I think we're going to do a whole series on AI, to be frank. There's a lot happening, and she and I are going to be along for the ride. I'm supporting her work, she's supporting mine, so I think you'll hear more from her. So in the episodes to come, you're going to meet other remarkable individuals, leaders, thinkers, and pioneers who are already living in this new paradigm. But for now, I invite you to sit back and hang out with this question. What if the uncertainty you're feeling isn't just about the world changing? What if it's also about you being ready to pivot? If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone who might be ready for their own pivot. This is The Pivot. I'm Dave Schoof, and I look forward to exploring these territories with you.